Okay, Quik, can you see that?
Looks good.
Right, fantastic. Okay, welcome everybody. This is the next in a series of what I think we can now call the Squirrel and Quik show. So hello, Quik. This is the third one of these we've done.
Tally ho.
And look, we've done the first two and we had a really good response from people. And thank you for that positive response. And the responses are basically two sets of responses. The first one was, this is great. You guys should cover more topics. You should try and do various things now. That was about 50% of the responses. And then a clear half or more of the responses being, this is all very interesting, but when are you going to get MalcPow on to talk about drafting?
Yeah.
So, hello, MalcPow. What's going on?
Hey, how's it going?
Well, welcome to the Squirrel and Quik show. I think we should get a house band for this, don't you think, Quik?
I like that, actually. Yeah. You think Coldplay is available?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is a big budget show too, so it's going to be. So look, we were just talking about this, which we hopefully can all see on our screens. I hope you guys can see it. When I first got into front office football in 2016, I was sort of playing it. I was sort of finding it quite interesting, and then I found the FOF forum. I read a load of stuff on there, a lot of the stuff Ben produced. But when I found this thing, some combine benchmarks and drafting thoughts, I was absolutely off to the races. And this thing was written 10 years ago. So that must feel like quite a long time ago.
It does for me. I know that.
It was a bit ago. It was definitely a bit ago. The funniest thing to me about this thread is I think when I actually posted this, in my mind, this was a all right, I'm done with this game. I'm not going to play this game anymore. I'm done competing with people in multiplayer leagues, and why not do something nice on my way out the door and, share some insights and try and kind of distill some concepts down in a way that would be really helpful to people now that I'm no longer competing with assholes like Quik, and I can just sort of have this be my nice little sort of act of generosity on my way out of the community. And
how did that pan out for you?
Well, like you said, it's been 10 years, and this thread, I think, obviously it's born out of, it's just sort of a way of looking at the game, which was, all right, what's going on here? Like, how are these players created? At the time, it was fairly easy to import draft classes into the game. And, I think I've always had, a gift for really just sort of throwing myself into extremely tedious tasks. And that at this point in my life, the way I tackled this problem set was a very tedious importing of many draft classes with, incrementally different numbers in different places, and just sort of capturing the information and, trying to kind of see, what might jump out. And, I think in that iteration of the game, a lot jumped out like pretty quickly. And you could learn certainly, like, we talked about this at the time, but, where different breakpoints were, where you could tell that there's basically, a mortal certainty that this guy's bar is not going to be above, a certain area, because this combine benchmark, what a great coined phrase there. This combine benchmark, this combine. What's funny? It's really nice for me to see this thread too, because I swear to God, I have it bookmarked on my computer, but when I click it, it just takes me to some random place. So I don't know if Ben has blocked me from the benchmarks thread.
I mean, you can't roll that out.
It's possible. It's very possible. There was a period of time where I deleted it a couple times as like a troll move.
You deleted it from the forum?
Yeah, and I think and Ben had to restore it, and
we're not going to do that.
Yeah, so that's probably why I don't have access to it anymore or something. It's just sort of he had to take my toy away from me. But
I like it.
But yeah, 10 years ago. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's a fair one. Look, the way this read to me when I first, as I said, I got into this game 2016, right? It's when I first downloaded it and first sort of got into I think I joined my first multiplayer league towards the back end of that year. And at that point, it seemed to me that where the game had got to was this approach had become so prevalent that in most competitive leagues, after sort of the third or fourth round, there were no players left because the 100 or 125 or however many number it is usable players there are in a draft class were all taken. And it was like, well, all right, that was, and it was because of this, everyone was just applying this, or at least most of the people were applying this. And then so the leagues were moving to these approaches, sort of radical approaches with the game engine, trying to find ways to make it less obvious. And there was I can't remember the exact number, but there was a combined correlation number, right, in the settings of the game that people were toying with or whatever to try and make it harder. Anyway, doesn't matter. The point is that was where I kind of came into the picture. And obviously you guys are OGs in this. You've been playing this for a long, long time. And there have been lots of different ways of going. But what we're going to try to do today, as we record this in July 2020, with a fairly mature Front Office Football 8 is 8.3, the latest iteration with some changes to the game engine a few months ago now. Is basically see where we are. Maybe not this level of detail and the tedium involved in coming to it, but basically where are we in drafting, and appreciate you coming on to do this, MalcPow, because there's basically a couple things I guess we might want to talk about. The first one, which I think is the bulk of it really, is what you might call prospect evaluation. So when we're playing the game, we're looking at it and we're saying, all right, so is this prospect a better person to pick than this one? If why, what are we weighing up? How do we think about it? So that's one, prospect evaluation. And then two, draft strategy. So once you've evaluated all the prospects satisfactorily, what do you do about it? Do you pick this one or that one? Do you trade the pick? Do you do something else? So I think we park draft strategy, we'll talk about that at the end, and really focus on prospect evaluation and think about the process of how do you look at a new draft class, and hopefully people watching this can get a few useful pointers. So at that point, I'm definitely clearing the field here because MalcPow is the absolute master of this stuff. And let me ask you, before we get into what you're looking for, can I ask you what your process is? How do you do it? If you have got the time and inclination to really have a proper look at a draft class for a league you care about, how do you do it?
Yeah, no, I think, there's going to be different parts of this conversation. I think how I do it is probably not going to be, exactly replicable for everyone. But I think there's some big picture concepts that I think, we can talk about that'll help a lot of people. How I do it, I dump every bit of information, that the game allows via the CSVs. And then I've got some scripts and some Excel macros and some other things that I run that put the information into, I guess, what I would call, kind of a clean sheet. And then, I've built a number of things over the years that allow me to both make bar estimations. And then, I don't know if this is the perfect place to kind of talk about this, but I've spent a lot of time thinking about and sort of realizing that there's, that the notion of, we can talk about 375 to 625, which is, sort of like, the nomenclature of the combine benchmarks thread. And then we can kind of talk about the 0 to 9 notion, which is where you would find it. I guess you might find like an explanation of the 0 to 9 in maybe the roster file generator in that sort of help button. But for some reason, the game has this 0 to 9 concept where zeros are filler players or complete scrubs. Ones, I'm messing up the exact lingo. So please go find the program you've never run in your life, which is this sort of sub program of the game, which is the roster file generator, and then hit the help button or the CSV glossary button, whatever it's called.
I literally don't even know what that is. So you might take us a step back, because I don't know what the roster file generator is, I have to say.
It's you're gonna have to go into your local. Yeah, I mean, this is stuff that was easy to get to in past iterations of the game. I would say, like in the in the Steam
Yeah.
the Steam
I think
generation.
Steam has made this harder. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a program that's in your solosysmic. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah.
I've been playing this game for 20 years and I have no idea how to pronounce Jim's company name. But you'd have to go into that folder, and there's going to be a couple like sub programs that are used to kind of help generate roster files and do those sorts of things. Anyway, that's a very long preamble for the game. Has this concept of kind of 0 to 9s, and 9, I think the descriptor is rare superstar, and zeros and ones are these zeros in particular are these fillers, and 50% of kind of a generated class are zeros, and some very small, I have no idea why, like literally, the percentages between like a 5 and a 9, like a 5 and a 6 and a 7 and an 8 and a 9 are so sort of finely distinguished that I have no idea why it's necessary for there to be 0.4% of the players are 9s and 0.7% are 8s and 58% are zeros. It feels like a little bit of overkill to go all the way 0 to 9 on it, but anyway, I'm taking a long way to get there. These are
trappings of a single developer game. I mean, one of the threads we got into in an earlier video was, this isn't like Football Manager where you have SI games and 37 people who are in charge of these algorithms. You got one guy in Ann Arbor, Michigan doing this by himself. So if he decided 0 through 9 is the right set of baskets and 0.4% is the right thing to do, then that's what it's going to be.
Yeah. And you know what? And honestly, as we know well, a lot of these decisions, they were made 15 years ago. And, code base of this game, is Jim going to do a total rewrite on how he generates players? Because, some weird dude went and like tried to break the game with imported draft files and all sorts of other stuff like that. Like, no, he's not, because it's too much work and it's too tedious. So, let's slap some kind of modifier that jumbles the numbers a little bit and kind of go from there. But yeah, and honestly, I brought it up mostly because in addition to sort of doing bar estimators, if you do ever find like the roster file generator, I do think it's useful to just, so if you generate a random roster file and import it into the game, you can input every rating you want, or sort of an estimation for every rating that you want in the game. If you want to say that, Tom Brady is a 9 short passer, you can put that in there. Or you can just sort of set the player talent level, which is this 0 to 9 number that kind of corresponds to these different, distributions of rare superstars and excellent superstars and very good superstars. And again, why, I have no idea why there need to be these such finely sort of crafted distinctions at these levels. But you can, for that player talent level, you can go and you can just say, well, Tom Brady is an 8, and import the roster file and see what happens, basically.
I say.
And so what's interesting, or what was interesting to me about that is, okay, I do roster files of all 9s or all 5s or all 3s or all 2s. And, or I do roster files where like, hey, like if you were a 9, your last name was 9. If you were an 8, your last name was 8. And then just, kind of randomize all these things on different rosters and go through and look and see, all right, when I pull up, the highest rated players in the game, what are they? And some of them were 8s and 9s, but some of them were 2s and 3s. And it gives you, and yes, yeah. And you also would see different kind of bar profiles, which is probably the more interesting, I think, insight. You'd see things like, okay, there's a 75 rated defensive tackle. He's a 1. Like, what's going on with this guy? And it's like, oh, okay, he's got really big bars here, here, and here, but his endurance sucks. So, what does that mean?
But is that, exactly. What does that mean? Does that mean the player's bad, but he looks good? Or does it mean the player's good, but he just started from a bad, like, what do you mean? What do I mean there? Which of the, like, is it an effective player or not?
It's a great question, and I think there's even another layer, which is, all right, does Jim think he's an effective player, and versus does whatever is happening in the current iteration of the game engine actually sort of allow this guy's contributions to be effective at that level? And what I mean by that is, like, obviously there have been different points in time where big play receiving was super powered for like a moment. But every guy with a huge big play receiving bar wasn't massively, or super highly rated by the game. So it's clear that, the algorithms or the scouting ratings or the overall player rating, wasn't sort of correctly capturing, what bars were actually driving, elite outcomes in the engine. And so, yeah, I think I have like a little bit of the short answer is I don't know. The longer answer is I think there are some guys that get dropped into the player generation algorithm. Personally, my gut is that this 0 to 9 is the first thing that's generated. And a certain distribution of these sorts of guys, to sort of, to give some kind of like continuity and realism to a draft class. There's going to be X number of 5 to 9 guys generated in a given draft class, with some randomness, but not so much that there's a draft class where 20% of the guys are superstars or something like that. But that 0 to 9 to me, I think gets generated first, and then I think the bars get generated after that. And then, to your point, I think there are guys who have really big bars, so big overall ratings in the game, who, at least the developer, doesn't intend to be, not every 75 rated defensive tackle is a superstar, I guess. And then I think there is the kind of the further question, which is, all right, like which bars really drive value. And so I guess trying to tie it all together with a little bit of a bow, I do some bar estimation, and then I do some what I would call just sort of like a player similarity score that gives me a sense of if I'm looking at a 0 or a 1, or if for me, I've broken it out. Really, the 0s and 1s are kind of their own thing. 2, 3s, and 4s, 2s and 3s, 2s. These are like, honestly, these guys can range anywhere from like 40 to 80 from like an overall standpoint is sort of, what I've seen. 5 to 9s, like those are the really good players. Those are the guys that like you would pull up on kind of any team, and they've got dominant ratings, and no reason to think that that they're not going to play a ton and be really effective and all these other things. So I kind of have it broken up in that way, where I do some straight bar estimation, which there are a bunch of people playing the game who have obviously, whether they're using regression or machine learning, who knows what different people are using. I don't know if there's not a ton of extra juice, I don't think, in sort of a more advanced technique to do bar estimation based off of, your scouts estimated bars and combines and, raw grades and those sorts of inputs. I think those things will get you to a pretty good bar estimator in general. And then I'm guessing there aren't a lot of people who are messing around with this kind of role thing, which admittedly, if you haven't spent a ton of time, like I just described, kind of looking at in a non-game, this isn't playing the game, obviously. This is really weird stuff that people who don't sleep all that well,
Ooh, yeah.
And were paying attention when they were being taught statistics at university.
Yeah, exactly. So it's anyway, so I do this kind of like, I guess, talent estimator. In my mind, I call that, I call it like, his tier or his class, or is he do I think he's like and I'd always, if I'm talking like with, I wouldn't call anyone who plays the game normal, by the way, but if I'm talking to normal FOF players, I translate the kind of the 4 to 9s or the 5 to 9s. Those are like 60 plus guys for me, which You know, I think those are real players. And then 2s and 3s, those are those 45 to 55s. You can do some stuff. And anyway, long way of getting there. I do a bar estimation. I do a class estimation, and then that narrows down the pool to usually for me probably somewhere in like a 60 player range, 70 player range, 50 to 100, somewhere in there. And then I look at positions I'm really interested in for masking patterns and those sorts of things, and make the picks.
So let me have a go at just applying that back to you, if that's all right. So on this roster file generator thing, where because I say I've never looked at it, so it's something for me to go and learn about. But basically, and so far as I understand it from this conversation, it's still there. It's not something that was there in the past. It's still there now. Something for me to go and learn about. But
let me check. It's definitely there. It's got to be there. But
I've just been having a look for it. My second screen with no success, but that doesn't tell you it's not there. It just tells you I'm not very good at looking for it. So all right. So you let's say we wanted to try and I don't think there are many people that are going to be able to replicate this, but let's say we try to replicate what you're doing. Basically, one way that you could do it, I'm sure there are better or other ways, would be to say, all right, we're going to plug into this thing a class of all zeros, a class of all ones, a class of all twos, a class of up to 9. You keep doing it. If you were going to try and do this in a rigorous way, you keep doing it. So you had a whole pool of zeros, a whole pool of ones, a whole pool of all the way to 9. You had a database with all of this stuff. Then you would need a script that takes out of the game the relevant prospect. It would compare up against the prospects to figure out which is the most similar, which is you use the phrase similarity score, which is a phrase I have some familiarity with. And I think we're talking about in statistics, don't want to get too technical, but this kind of calculation that you hear people talk about is what they call a nearest neighbor analysis. I imagine that's something you would have some familiarity with, where you basically try and figure out which of the prospects is closest to this particular process. Out of it, you've got one prospect here, you've got a database of 100,000 over here, which 10 are the closest? And then you'd say, all right, this prospect, the 10 closest guys, half of them are 4s and half of them are 1s. So that tells me something. Or maybe they're all 7s or whatever, it doesn't matter. You get a sense from that as to whether it's likely to be a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you get a sense of the distribution of possible outcomes. That's one thing. Separately and differently, with the prospect, you say, all right, this prospect's got all this information that I know, and if I put that into another analysis, it might be a regression analysis, which again, for those who haven't been taught statistics at university, regression is a way of using a bunch of different, trying to identify the weightings in a bunch of different data, which is important. So it might say, if it's got this bar, that's important. If the combine looks like this, that's this important, or whatever. And it spits out a guess. Again, it might be a point estimate or a range of outcomes. And it does that to try and sort of guess. And you've got basically a click of a mouse that does all this for you, because obviously it's incredible, at least some fraction of all of that, and maybe other stuff too. And that's how you get to 60. You're starting with 60 or 100 in a class because you've got the button to press and you don't have to do all of that work every time, right?
Yeah, and there are obviously, there are guys that I miss, and obviously there are guys that boom, but I capture enough guys that I can look at quickly enough, and obviously I've been comfortable with the decisions that I've made, that I don't feel like I'm missing. Whatever I'm missing is so non-essential that it's fine. I don't mind missing. And it might be 5 guys, it might be 20 guys, but I've got. I mean, really, at the end of the day, when I make a pick, I've got a bar estimation for each relevant rating. I've got this overall talent kind of estimation. I've got where I think this guy ranks in the class by position group. And then I've got where I think this guy ranks in the broader universe at that moment in time. So if like the 10th best wide receiver in the league is rated 67, and I think this guy is, my stuff says this guy's a 68, this is the 10th best wide receiver in the universe that I can draft at, pick 123, then like that's powerful. That's like, that's how I kind of like break it all down. And when I make the decision, those are the items that are in front of me, basically.
And with that analysis in hand and that much experience and whatever, how much uncertainty do you still face? Like, how many times did that forecast prove to be wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I feel really comfortable that I can almost always get like a, like a 47 or above player or something. Like I feel really comfortable that I'm not drafting the guy who's a 33 who I think is a 70. I think if when I make a first round pick, I'm very, very, shy of having a, volatility stick of death or something like that. I feel pretty comfortable almost all the time that I'm taking a 55 or better player. And most of the time it's a guy that I think is one of these 5 to 9s. But I think that also, like, you know, I tend to kind of like, run towards these guys that I have a high degree of confidence in as well. And that ends up being like, oh, sweet, I just took a 70 rated guard at pick 18 in the draft or something, because the more useful players on the board had more risk, and I just couldn't quite pull the trigger on, letting Quik watch a player, go down in camp and his ratings and all this other stuff. So, I tend to.
I do get the pleasure out of that.
I know. So I tend to make what I would call.
I will interject. I do like that it seems like everybody has resulted in the same bottom line, that when we make this pejorative statement about settling for a non-impact position, we all use a guard as the example, right? I guess I could just take a guard, but why do that? I mean, look at this wide receiver. He might be a thing, but I'll take the guard. That's fine.
I took a guard in the IHOF class that
like
Quik
pick 4 or something
with pick 4 because because we're talking this through. He showed up as basically like a 90 plus, like in my stuff, yeah. with like 7s, 8s, and 9s is like, his, he was a stud. He was going to be an absolute stud. And what does it do for you? What does it mean? It does less for me than like literally there was like 3 or 4 like 70 rated receivers that I didn't take, which was just stupid. But it's there's something exciting about, having one of those yellow guys on your roster screen, the guys with the 80 plus ratings. I mean, again, there are times where I'm like, I'm not even sure if I'm playing the game. I'm definitely not playing the game as intended. I'm playing some kind of weird meta draft thing because I'm good at it, and like that's what we all do, I guess.
But it's fascinating. I mean, that's part of the reason. If the next iteration of this game didn't let you spit the CSVs out, I think it'd be a very different game. For well or ill, it'd be a completely different game. There wouldn't be this opportunity for people to take these, statistical, econometric, whatever you want to describe it, approaches. People do it in different ways. Zach or T-Zach, however we call it, is doing exactly this kind of, advancing everyone's understanding of game planning in a similar kind of way, very analytically rigorous, data-driven. And I think there's a spirit intended as well. I don't think, because if you go too far on these ways, people start thinking that you're not playing the game as it's intended. I don't think that's the aim here. It sounds like what you're doing is far more interesting. In fact, totally fascinating. I have a much more embryonic version of what you just described. I don't have elements of it. They're complete, bits of this. I'm definitely a 0 in this compared to your 9, right? But I've got a one-click
You're a 4,
thing.
Jamie.
Yeah, I don't know about okay, I'll take a 4. I'll take that. But it gives me. I press one button, it gives me a draft board satisfying experience, right? It doesn't always have to be right or wrong. And that's. I mean, how quick can I ask you? How does this stuff? There's obviously a lot of hardcore statistics down here. Yeah. Does this stuff? How does this resemble? Does this bear? Does your process bear resemblance to this? Is there any connection? Maybe you're not sitting there over, scripting and all this stuff, but like, where's the bits in that you relate to, and where's the bits in that you don't?
I think lots of this piece by piece connects to what any serious FOFer does. So, like, if let me step out of my quicksand role for a moment and instead sort of play audience proxy. And what I'll say is, okay, sure, we got MalcPow on the show, and he's going to talk about drafting. And so, all right, no surprises yet. He says he's got some complicated black box thing, and he inputs a bunch of CSVs, and it pops out this beautiful report that says, hey, there's 60 good guys in this draft, and some of them are going to be there in the 4th round. Okay, like we kind of get that. Now, whatever his specific sauce is that makes his analytics more intriguing or more accurate than most of the rest of ours, or maybe all of the rest of ours, that's the interesting stuff. So, like, what I want to do, rather than contrast with me as a drafter, I want to press MalcPow, not to like put all the cards on the table, but we know there's a bunch of different ingredients, right? I mean, everybody knows that these specific bars that come out fully formed, the static bars, they play an important role. We know that like percent developed is vaguely important. We know that the combines correlate to things, and there used to be certain bars that were paired together, and that was a tell. Like all this mix of ingredients that can go into the smoothie. So like, what can you say about where you are now in jumbling all those things together? I mean, how do you spiral all those things into? I mean, is it just a spreadsheet and it's just too hard to take any of those pieces out, or is the world missing something that you can articulate and would be willing to share?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, the tools that are pretty, pretty available, like Draft Analyzer and sort of some, I mean, I think, look, if you just took hole recognition running backs, route running wide receivers, sense rush QBs, pass rush technique defensive linemen, man and bump corners, zone safeties, well-rounded linebackers. Like if you just looked for those ratings and took the guys who didn't look like they were complete one-trick ponies that had some other ability like beyond that, like you'd put great teams together. And I think it's not that hard to kind of sort by those things as like a starting point. I think there's also an element of the raw grade, whatever you want, the bureau grade, whatever you want to call that.
Yeah. I've seen you refer to that a lot more than basically anyone else. You think there's information in that?
I think there's a lot of information in that raw grade, and I think there's I think it's a good check. Not because it's look, like if you get 30 guys deep in the wide receiver class, like obviously, the raw grade is not what's going to tell you to take that guy, and most of the time, honestly, most of the time when you get that deep, that guy does have like tremendous bars, or he's a no combine guy. And like, there's a really good reason to take like a second look at that guy and not just sort of lump him in with, all the other 2.8 bureau rating guys or whatever down there at the bottom of that screen. And so, I just, to me, it's that raw grade. My instinct is that it has some, it has some kind of tie to this talent rating that we're talking about. And again, like none of us know what's going on under the hood. Like, we're looking at the shadows on the wall. But some of this stuff I think like paints enough of a picture that you should use it as a base. And obviously, yeah, like kind of like you guys are saying, I click a few buttons and, kick my feet up, light the cigar, and, the magic box spits out my list. And, but like the sad thing is, that's that list of 50 to 100 or whatever it is. Like, I go through looking at masking patterns and trying to figure out if I really think this guy is like the 2 or is he the 8, what's going on there. And that is like, that is where it does become feel, and it becomes what I think, even people who are playing the game just in a more normal way, like develop those reps and that intuition for, okay, this is what a good player looks like. I've seen this guy before. He grows over time, however you want to like frame that or phrase it. It's, I think that pattern recognition is something that's familiar to, I think, most people who play the game. You start to see things that kind of show up over time. I mean, look, the bottom line of it is we know that there's a bunch of weird sort of like residue for the player generation algorithm. Like we know that guys in different affinity groups have different personality profiles. Like I'll take it a step like further for you, and guys with different birthdays have different personality profiles. Like it's random number generation, rooted in, you know, a number of algorithms that, you know, it can't be random. Like it can't be fully random, I guess is the way to put it. So
I've got to say, it's a miracle it hasn't been solved. I mean, that thing, you know, it is fairly well solved, right? And, you know, quite a few people have tried. Obviously, not that many people have done it to the same technological extent of you, though there were people who have tried. And it isn't readily solvable. And I have to say, I think that's very impressive. In many respects, I think it's a masterpiece because, you know, for it to be hard enough to warrant that much discovery process and interesting enough, but at the same time not be so stochastic that it just feels totally unrealistic, I think is really impressive.
No, I agree. And I think part of that, you know, the game itself to me is such an elegant, you know, really, it's a very elegant piece of software from like the user standpoint. My intuition or my gut on the other side is that it might be an absolute mess, like kind of just from the standpoint of it's not solvable because in code line, you know, 1,200,384, you know, you've got a 2% higher chance of this guy taking this, you know, off tackle run to the house because, you know, because your guard really likes your center, you know, and just sort of like, and I really do think that like there's a bunch of little variables that are just like all of them tacked on, thrown in, like it's not this clean little sort of play resolution algorithm or any of the algorithms really. I think there's probably just a intricate mosaic of all sorts of little algorithms that are kind of, you know, driving all sorts of stuff in this game. And part of it creates like a really, I think, like I said, I like the word elegant sort of experience with the game. But my gut is that it's probably pretty messy underneath, man. I don't know.
So before we get to some, because we're going to look at some specific picks to jump out of this. I think that'd be really interesting for everybody to look at. There are a couple I'm fascinated by. But before we do that, can we just go a little bit quick fire, right? Because this is my list of the things. I've got a little thing. It's not as sophisticated as yours, but it does a decent job at identifying good prospects. I've probably had a decent drafting record, right? My analysis basically works in various ways of the following things is what it's looking for, right? So first is it looks at the combines. So if we go down my list to the right, and then we basically just say, yeah, okay, a little bit or a lot or something, right? So combines, I look at the combines a bit, right? I don't look at them like people did 5 years ago, but I look at them a bit, right? I then take the combine and I kind of try and overlay it on the bar. You know, combine like this with bar like this normally results in outcome like this. You know, normally is a word I've used carefully. The middle of a distribution of possible outcomes, it normally looks a bit like this, right? So that's another thing. Then signature of the bars, so the shape of the bars, right? You know, these ones that look a bit like this are normally good players. And I don't look at that so much with my eyes because I haven't got the same pattern recognition as you guys. I just have a computer do, as you just said, a similarity score against a bunch of other guys. You know, 15 guys with the same signature all turned out to be fine. You know, 10 of them turned out to be fine. These are all things you're looking at so far, right? Nothing, shut me down to something which you just don't think is relevant or you think it's super relevant. Static bars, how much you look at static bars? A lot of people focus on them pretty heavily.
I thought it was a huge tell. You know, in earlier iterations of the game, I think there are really good players at certain positions that don't have a high static bar. I mean, I think it's probably always better to have the higher bar than the lower bar. Don't get me wrong, but you know, I think I've seen enough really good players that don't have a big blocking strength bar or a pass rush strength bar, and so I look at it, but it's, and just from my eye test, it's not the biggest driver in the world. It probably is a pretty big separator in some of the automated pieces that's helped me kind of filter through. That's probably a fair point, that the things that aren't part of my active thought process, my guess is, you're dropping a lot of guys out of the mix that just don't have anything in those bars. There's definitely a masking pattern that obviously doesn't touch the static bars. Most masking doesn't touch the static bars. So it helps you kind of like try to figure out if there's a mask going on, but I guess it's more of a feel thing than like a pure yes, no.
Yeah, and for the benefit of people, sorry, go on, Quik, please.
No, I think the game has introduced more noise in this particular area to defeat the static bars being too much of a tell. So back in the days of like FOF 4 years and years ago, the offensive linemen who had virtually no run blocking and pass blocking ability, but had like a 95 static bar for blocking strength, that player was almost a giveaway tell that he was a talented player who was being overwhelmingly masked to look like he can't play football, but he really can. Yeah. And he would reveal over time to be good. Now, in the modern iterations of FOF, there are players whose only talents are he happens to have this one big static rating or two big static ratings, and nothing else is going to change much at all. And those guys didn't exist some time ago.
No, and for the benefit of people that are relatively new to all of this, don't know what we're talking about. Static bars on the screen as a simplified version of it, and then better way to do it, go and download something called Draft Analyzer, which you'll find put together by an experienced player called Greg Stelmack. You will find it, and then when you look at a prospect, I think they're colored in green or whatever, and it'll cross-check that against this, and you'll figure out what we mean when we talk about static bars. All right, what about? So how much, MalcPow, are you looking at the relationship between the bars and the combines? Is that a big thing for you? A lot of people focus on that pretty heavily. This bar's wrong for the combine. This looks wrong, feels wrong.
Yeah, I think, there's my sort of, I mean, it kind of goes back to, again, like I've got an estimation for each bar. And I think, that's a relationship between the combines, my scouts picture of the bar, a broader sense of kind of how that guy's bars are distributed. And again, whether I think he fits into X bucket, Y bucket, Z bucket from an overall talent standpoint. Yeah. And then that puts an estimation on each particular bar, basically.
Okay.
So.
What about prospect age? And you get a little percentage development score. What about that?
I really like the young guys, and if possible, I like young guys with sort of an overdeveloped, relative to their peers, percent developed. So I think there's a relationship there that's meaningful.
Yeah. In my process, and I've never quantified this, but it's much more anecdotal. But I think of that in the same way as the statics. So if the development percentage is high for the age, that tells me something similar to what the statics telling me. If the statics high, you kind of know everything's going to be okay, maybe. Mm-hmm. Does that feel similar? Does your process feel similar to that? Is that in line?
Yeah, no, I think especially, I mean, again, we know that there's something generating these guys, and you're looking for outliers. Like these are features that may not jump out to a casual player or somebody who's like new to the game to even look at age or some sort of relationship between age and percent developed, or to really even spend much time looking at percent developed at all, which, frankly, like I've had, there are picks that I've made that have been really successful from when the unveil happens, what this guy's rated, but the work that it would take to actually guide that, that 6'72" center, guard, linebacker, quarterback, whatever. It's 4 seasons of development, if not more, to get that guy all the way to the point where you're like, okay, look at my shiny player right before he hits free agency. So those are things that I think just, whether they're tells in drafting or not, it's better gameplay, I think, to try to, be wary of what you're doing, and what that guy's going to show up on your roster as, and how he can contribute, and how long it's going to take for him to, kind of grow into his game. And if you're going to have to play a bad player for multiple seasons to like get a good player,
Yep.
Is that really worth it? So,
Yep.
So if you're playing meta games like me and just chasing, the top draft and Ben's rankings or something, you don't care. But if you're actually trying to win real games, you might want to think about it. So
I think if for those I haven't seen, again on the screen, when I post this on forum somewhere, I'll put the links in so people don't have to try and hunt it down themselves. But again, I've put on the screen here. This is code that came out of, I think, comes out of Draft Analyzer, where Greg's figured out what the relationship is between the overall rating and the individual bar ratings by position, and that's all just in this thread. So you don't have to figure it out for yourself. So if you care about the overall rating of a prospect, and a lot of people don't care, but if you do care and you're trying to figure out which bars matter and all that sort of stuff, because if you do this, one way you can do it, and there are a lot of people that do it, is you basically can use this in this thread here to back solve from the bars. You can see, take the midpoint of the bar, multiply it through all of this, and then it'll tell you an estimate as to what you think the overall rating of the player will be. Whether that's useful or not is a secondary consideration. A lot of people do that, and then they might say, all right, that's an estimate, but then you might say, and this is, I think, a more simplified version of what MalcPow's doing, but you'd say that, and then you'd say, all right, what's the probability that actually happens to pass? Statics help, high development percentage for the age help, raw score helps, combines help, whatever else I've forgotten to mention helps or hinders, and you can kind of get a sense of confidence. And I think that, have we captured the ground there? Is there anything else that we're including in thinking about a draft prospect that we haven't talked about before we get to the specifics? I think that's it, right?
I think that's it. Yeah, I mean, I guess masking, but then again, that's just kind of looking at guys and feeling like they don't look right, one way or the other. So
yeah, and that's that. Again, that I guess is what you'd call the same. Is that the same thing as bar signature? We're saying the same thing, right? The shape of the bars.
We're saying the same thing. Yep.
Okay, and then how much do you care? One thing before we get onto the picks, how much do you care how good your scouts are, right? So in GML, which we're going to talk about in a minute, my scouts are laughable. They're terrible, right? Do you care? Does it matter for your pro? Does it make any difference to you whether your scouts are good or bad?
You know what? It would show up if I was attentive enough. But I've actually like my Ben, Ben has this staff draft tool, which is excellent. And like my weights for the scouting and interviewing are ones or whatever.
Okay.
And I almost seek out bad scouting at this point, because I think it actually helps me. Like, again, I'm narrowing this class down to 60 or 100 guys, and I almost want to see the mask stuff. That kind of helps me at times. But that's like I really think that's kind of like, hey, like, Phil Mickelson likes to hit the flop shot here. Like, I need to get my putter out and keep this damn thing on the ground, and like not, it's like this is like I'm not saying I would recommend that for everybody, but I've kind of pursued bad scouting, I guess, is one way. I don't know if you can really pursue it, but I've tried to kind of weight my staff towards the other attributes.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's good stuff right there.
That's really amazing. And most people that are not doing this in a data-driven way probably shouldn't follow that advice. but I think that it goes to show the relative importance of calculation. One more thing before we get on to specific picks. If people watching this don't know, in the help, type this in, Analyst Scouting Combine. It tells, Jim just tells us where the combines are supposed to relate to the bars. So if you want to start thinking about it in a more data-driven way, this is a decent place to start, or at least I think it probably is. All right, let's get into a pick. Can I just do this? I know it's we probably could do this first, second round, second, third round order on the GML picks. We just had a GML draft. Can we just start with this third round pick, the defensive tackle? This guy here, hopefully So my process, which again is very much less sophisticated than yours, as we've just clearly demonstrated, my thing, I press my one button, it does all this for me, right? It's on the screen now. Hopefully you can see it. And one of the things it can generate is a review of the draft, right? So it's not the same as Ben's at all. I think our value and very different things, and probably not sophisticated as Ben's. But here's all the teams, and we go down, and in 10th place is the MalcPow draft class, and here's the players he's picked, right? And on my process, he's defensive tackle, third rounder, gets an E. And mine is saying, what the hell is this, right? Can you see this? Quick, would you pick this guy, Quick, with the 10th pick of the third round?
I need to know what sign he was born under. But, what's to like here, right? Seriously, he's got a couple static bars that look okay. He looks like a nice 6th round pick to me. That's fine. Not in the 3rd. Come on, tell us, walk us through it, man. He's got a good combines are fine.
Hold on. There we go. Put back on the screen. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. There you go. Yeah, what's going on with this guy?
Well, I think for me, like when you're looking for like a defensive tackle, like for me, like the bars that I'm looking for are run defense, pass rush technique, endurance, and I like play diagnosis and punishing hitter. This guy, that bar profile is a little lighter than what I had, and even with whatever quality scouts I had, that's a little lighter than what I looked at. But I also like this pick, if I'm being totally forthright too, and these are the things that happen. There's a safety, if you scroll up, who I thought was an absolute slam dunk. This guy right here, corner conversion. That guy to me looks really that guy looks awesome. I'll look at those combines. I think
combines are off the charts, right?
The combines are insane. He's a safety. The game does not generate a lot of good safeties. And I think this guy's going to be a really good pick right here. And he was, so whoever this guy is, Sox Nation 34, nice to meet you, bro. You picked my pocket.
Broke your heart.
and well, the sad thing is I went to bed and I was like, all right, I'm getting this like cool safety that I really like. And I woke up and I got this defensive tackle. Now they're both in my priority list, don't get me wrong, but like Sox Nation held the draft hostage overnight. I really wanted to take that guy, and just the Sox Nation, man, nemesis. You're on the list, bro. But no, I like this guy. I think this guy's going to be, and for this particular team, I felt like I needed, I wanted to get offensive players, but I needed to add like good players. I think this guy's probably going to be like a 55 or something like that, and play on my D line and be pretty.
So
good.
Just to, I won't bore everybody with you. On my other screen here, I've opened this guy up, and if you just multiply those bars through the Greg Stelmat weightings and do nothing else, it says the guy should be a 38 rated player, right? According to me. And then his age, 25, so he's old, but his development is 56. You can't see the age on this screen, but you can see the development. So that's highly developed, I guess.
Yep. There's
no static, really. I guess punishing it is a static, but, maybe you should look to this one too, because there's two, I think I'm right in saying there are two statics on D lineman, right? P, pass rush strength, and then this one, yep. And punishing hitter. And so that's low. And so, I've got to say, I was a bit confounded by this, but I've obviously seen you do it so many times. These statics are all right, but there's nothing, these combines are all right, but there's nothing there which is an outlier. Is that shape driving you to think it's a good pick, right?
Yeah, there's aspects of the shape. I think, I'm looking at him right now in my sheet. He's 24. He's very highly developed.
24, sorry, I said 25.
No, you're fine.
Right.
And he, well, gosh, now I'm pulling my skirt up a little bit here. Quik has convinced me just through observation that maybe affinities matter. And
hello.
And so I've slowly started migrating most of my teams towards the purple group, which I think of as the smart group.
Yep.
And
that's something we can agree with you on. That's something that we know.
Yeah, we know that. So So this guy, I think, if I have it right here, was also partly a driver. Was looking at him as a guy who, you know what, he's not purple group, but he's not in a dumb. He wasn't dumb. That's what it was. It was kind of thinking through that as a potential concept. He's not a dumb group guy.
I don't want to dwell on this guy too long, but I'm looking at him in game right now with the sort of trade sneak peek, and
he's better, bro.
He looks like the player that when I look at him at this point, I'm like, oh yeah, he's gonna boom. He's gonna get better. He's almost fully developed. He's like the best possible version of this crappy looking blue bar profile we have on screen now, and he's gonna get better than that. Yeah, it's a good pick.
I've just tried to bring it on the screen, but my scouts, my scouts are atrocious, so don't believe that. All right, so that's that. Let's go up. Let's do this.
It's funny. It's funny that you picked that one because again, like I really wanted that safety, and that was just going back to it. Like that's a guy I feel like is going to be like a good, solid 55 with a lot of confidence. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I've been confounded. I mean, and I guess part of the reason why people wanted us to do this is because I'm not alone in that. I look at it and think, well, okay, I don't really get that one. Now here we are. This is now your first round pick in this GML draft. In a minute, we'll get to some IHOF ones where we've got the reveals because then they'll be interesting to see the reveals. But on this one, the 10th pick of the draft, you picked a 0 combine quarterback. Zero static. Sense rush is the static for QBs. You picked a 0 static guy. There are a lot of people that play this game who think that 0 bars in a draft prospect is a bad thing. It's a binary thing. If there's a 0 bar anywhere on the distribution, it's bad. Do you not agree with that view?
I don't agree with that. I don't. Yeah, I guess that's a pretty short way to address that. I'm hoping he doesn't have a 0. I mean, that would be unfortunate. I'm hoping it's like a nice solid 16 or something. But
I think it's a 0, man.
You think it's a 0? All right. Well, yeah. It's. I think he's. This guy, sometimes I just like these like sort of unique-ish players. I think this guy's going to be like a scrambling monster, like just like a fun player to kind of have on your team. And I think I said this in that thread I started the other day where, maybe intermittently I'm going to fire off 2 or 3 sentences about, what's going on with my little GML squad here. But this guy to me was like a very fascinating prospect. Like I think those bars are real. I think he's going to come in as a 60, 65 or better, like kind of overall rating quarterback. He's going to have this low sense rush bar, but I think there's obviously there's a relationship between scrambling frequency and that dash score, but there's a relationship between like how good a guy is when he scrambles in the dash bar as well. So I think this guy's going to be like really interesting as a dude who, maybe has some sack issues. Hopefully he's not a fumbler. I mean, there are things that even up here on my perch, even I don't know if these little shits are going to fumble or not. But
can you, do you think you've got a gauge, when you say fumble, and then again, for the benefit of people who don't play this game super detailed, there are 2 hidden attributes on quarterbacks: avoiding interceptions and avoiding fumbles, we think, at least I think. And the relationship between the overall rating you can see and the pattern of the bars and all that weighting stuff I just talked about with Greg Stelmank's work, there's a delta, and that delta seems to be an attempt to explain the hidden attributes, avoid interceptions and avoid fumbles. Do you think you've got any kind of handle on those 2 things in the draft process?
No. I mean, it would obviously be really powerful if you felt like you did. I mean, it's probably time well spent to try to tie that to sort of the raw grade.
The raw grade would be the key, yeah.
Now that I think about it, but it's not time that I've spent. I guess is the short answer there. Yeah. Don't do that to me. Don't start putting.
Oh, so that's the quarterback, and so if he comes out with loads of bars but no sense rush, and that'll be, for me, I think that means that it'll take a few, again, as you were saying before, a few years for this guy's bars to kind of reveal themselves in full, and who knows whether or not that affects performance during the first couple of seasons or whatever. But that's the quarterback. Then in the second round, so this one is another classic. Can you see these on my screen, all right? By the way, is this like kind of magnified enough? It's all clear. So this one's there's a couple of things going on here that I find interesting. One is I think there's a widespread expectation that it's a good idea to pick high intelligence offensive linemen, and this is an example of one. If you put that solid seismic score on a 0-100 scale, it's a 75, I think, or it's high. But the other thing people consistently would look for, I think, in the multiplayer community is a high run block bar on a center, and that tends to be what you see people trying to get. You've picked this one. What makes you do that?
Yeah, I think he's going to have a good run block bar. I mean, he's, the shape of his bars, his bar signature, I think is going to look like this, but I think he's going to be close to the upper threshold, I think, and kind of all these things, is sort of my gut on it. And I guess I can't call it a gut. This is vast data sets of, tediously acquired and sort of pumped into, little sort of spreadsheet boxes and Python scripts and everything else. But this guy to me is going to be really good. And at the end of the day, if that run bar is a 60, I think he's a very playable center. Like you said, it's a high soul score from a smart group. He's going to be intelligent. Again, I'll be totally blunt and honest and say that, like, when you say things like, hey, it's important to have high intelligence offensive linemen, I'm like everybody else out there, right? Like, I'm taking notes on what Zach says and you say and others say, and, different boards and those sorts of things, because, I feel like I've got a very, very good handle on obviously drafting and trying to kind of evaluate these guys as they're coming into the universe. But yeah, I don't know if, like, hey, you can't run the football at all if your center is a 48 rated run bar, and this is a really stupid wasted pick. I mean, there's a guy I took, a receiver, with other players I really liked on the board in the third round a couple IHOF drafts ago, and then Zach basically slacked me, and he was just like, yeah, so, like, have you figured out some way to get, like, production out of, like, low route running receivers? And I was like,
production, man, I'm going to win the draft. That's all.
Yeah, I was like, maybe, because I want to pretend to be smart, but no, like, how should I do this? And he was like, you can't. And so that guy, I mean, he's an awesome returner, and he's on the field a fair amount for us, and he's kind of turned into what he is. Prescott or something is his name, I think. And it's a useful player, but I honestly, like, I know I passed on, like, 65 plus rated, cornerback or something, to take my little 45 rated wide receiver or whatever he is,
who can't catch,
who's a good punt returner, but if you target him more than, like, twice a game, like, his hands turn to rocks or something. And it's so, I mean, at the end of the day, like, I'm listening too. Like, when you say it really matters to have intelligent offensive linemen, I think this guy's going to be pretty intelligent. I also think he fits the profile of sort of the better centers from an overall talent standpoint. Or you see guys who are really good, who the game generates like this, and maybe they're not a fit for all offenses, and maybe they're definitely, or maybe this guy's a perfect fit for a quarterback who is going to take 1 billion sacks if he's not really well protected. I'm not sure, but this is I liked this guy as a talent. This pick I actually liked. This guy, and Cleveland took a defensive end that I literally posted I would trade a second. At 230 or something.
Okay.
Like, literally the whole second round went with like me being like, I will trade you a second round pick for basically this guy. And you know, the engagement level, I guess, just wasn't quite high enough for somebody to take me up on it. And then
This guy.
that guy right
I
there.
mean, that's
I really
another
like
one.
that
That's
guy.
one. So there,
Yeah.
what do we got? We got combines, but then we just got no bars, and you just think, what the hell? You know, you pick someone like this, and you just think, well, how do you know this one's the boomer?
Well, he's not. It's not just look at those combines. Those aren't just like good combines. Those are insane combines. He's massive for a DE. Like this is the 77 306. Like that's a big dude. I probably would have played him at tackle and just let him be like an absolute like kind of monster in there. But I bet if we pull this guy up on our rosters, this guy to me was another guy that if it was like a single player game, I would have traded picks or whatever with the AI to do whatever it took to kind of get this guy too, because this guy's going to be very good.
So find a way to get the reveals on. I mean, for people, we haven't got through the stage. What is it, preseason 2 or whatever? So
yeah.
I don't know whether these reveals make any sense. And there's my scouting over there's the reveal. I mean, this reveal.
Hogwash.
You'd be like, what the hell? But
yeah, he's going to be
we've seen you do it. We've seen you do it 1,000 times. The guy's going to. In fact, let's go and do some of those now. So let's see if I can figure out how to do this side by side. You guys just bear with me for a second. So what I'm going to do now, this is going to be your IHOF draft from last year. So we haven't got like years and years and years of reveals for these people, but we're going to try if I can figure out how to do it and doing it in real time. It's probably not the world's most entertaining YouTube experience for somebody, but whatever. So we are going to try to do a side by side. It's just gone wrong. That's not very impressive. There it is. So all right. So here we are. So this is a prospect that you took in the last IHOF draft, and he's called Tristan Powell. And he didn't have any. So again, for the benefit of people who, they've not sat and listened to all these various videos that I've done and all the various conversations I've had recently, people who play this game a lot. I think there's a general consensus that people are looking for route running and getting downfield first and foremost in their wide receivers. And in order to do that, what they are doing is they are picking guys that have got those bars and then a high big play receiving. So any receiver that comes out with those 2 bars plus the high static, the big play receiving, will go in the Red Zone Blitz League I play in, will go in the top 10 picks, right? Every single time. Here we are, the 12th pick of an IHOF draft, where this guy's getting downfield bar is considerably less elite than everything else. You've taken him anyway, and oh, look, he's revealed and he's fine. He's got the getting downfield bar. So what's going on there?
I mean, this guy to me, all right. So like, this guy shows up in my pool of like, potentially very good players, right? I go and I look at him like that's a mask pattern to me when I see this sort of like the shape of all those really high bars and then like a clear kind of stair step down for some other grouping of bars. It used to be, obviously the combine benchmark thread talks about it. There used to be these masked pairs. It's not quite as straightforward now, but like just if you can think about like having kind of 2 tiers in sort of bar shapes, like that to me is sort of like a tell that not only is, this guy, if you think he's really good, this is almost like a confirmation that he's really good. If you think he's really bad, the other information is pointing you in that direction, this could be a tell like in that, but it's a big static bar. I liked this guy a lot. Again, I think like there's still something going on when like these guys slip into like when wide receivers slip into that 16 and above on bench. Like the other thing is this guy, he turned out to be even dumber than I expected, but he's a dumb birth month guy and he's got like, it's a very respectable like soul score. And again, the route running bar was really high. I thought there were multiple receivers in this class that were like very good, like honestly, like top 7 picks. And I took another one with my second round pick that, all guys that I thought were like 60 plus receivers. And then, my scouts have this guy as the best receiver in IHOF now from like a future rating standpoint. Whether he is or isn't, he's like, he's a top 5. So I was, I was pretty excited, probably a little too excited. I think I probably could have got him for, I think I traded up from 120 maybe or something like that.
Right.
But I gave a first to do it. Just because, I don't know, trade talks are trade talks, right? Like no one even listens unless you're like just coming to them with like your kids and your mortgage, and you're giving them everything you have. But yeah, I think I just didn't want this guy to like kind of slip through the cracks, and it's just hard. It's hard to be competitive in a lot of these leagues if you don't have like a obviously we use the bell cow terminology for running backs conventionally, but if you don't have a bell cow receiver in the FOF universe these days, it's tough to compete. And so I just really wanted this guy. And honestly, even money, like there isn't like a receiver like this, outside of the top 3 picks for the next, 4 or 5 draft classes. So it just made sense to go get him.
But it's only you that can see that getting downfield bar isn't 32 to 61. If that bar's 40, right, this player is still really good and really valuable. But if we all understand what the getting downfield bar does, I think most of us think it's yards after catch, right, or something akin to that. And so route running maybe is separation. All right, the guy's caught the ball now. He's caught it. That's valuable. But this guy's managed to get another 7 yards or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And that guy is the guy that's going to win you playoff games consistently. And therefore, if you knew that this guy, if you knew it was the guy on the right, the pattern on the right is worth the top 5 pick. The pattern on the left, I don't know. What do you reckon, Quik? 20th pick, 25th pick?
Right. Yeah. Down where we usually pick. Yeah, it's fine.
I like that. But look, I couldn't see that in a million years. I'd never have traded up to 112 with a future first to do that. Which again is why I think that's just such an impressive piece of play. Let me just then, and I'm going to move on to the next one. I'm going to try and see if I can get this side by side to work a bit more slickly here. So, all right, you then pick this guy in the 2nd round, and he did the same thing. We'll get to it in the review in a minute, but basically the getting downfield bar on this guy is like 80, right? And you can't see that from this. And is that the same sort of the logic similar, right? It's maybe just a less good version of similar logic set? Yeah,
no, I think this guy, there's clear separation between these two guys. But Norton to me was every bit of the 15th pick in a normal draft.
Yep.
And so, again, like you're talking about, like getting downfield is a very it's a maskable bar. Like that's if that is one of your key bars, that's a tougher one. That's a tougher one to peg. I would say, route running is a little bit more consistent, for sure. And you're getting a clearer picture usually of what you're getting in that standpoint, which is, since it's an overpowered bar, it's everyone out there drafting, I'm not saying you can take it to the bank what that route running bar is, but it's one of the more consistent bars. And since it probably should be driving a big part of what you're looking for in a receiver, take some comfort from that. But these guys were good players. I think this is what the good players look like. They've got some big bars, and honestly, I end up kind of drafting guys who fall into, when this guy's fully developed, he's not gonna be flat, but it's not gonna look as jagged, obviously, as that picture on the left, which is again to me a mask that again, I'm not saying it's easy to see or it's obvious or anything else, but this guy's got some really good combines. Everything else is kind of pointing towards this guy being productive, good, useful in the mix.
Even his endurance. I'm just back to the audience proxy, but you talk about masking. This player obviously is being hidden from us in the picture we see on the left. In that, during the draft, that profile. But look, his endurance, you have to be worried. If you're taking those bars or those estimates at face value, you're worried this guy's going to have a 29 endurance and he's going to be some sort of, asthmatic, comes off the field. And now your guy's, look like he's trending towards 55 or whatever in endurance. Perfectly credible to play the whole game and everything. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, but I mean, that's the thing, right? It's the 6th pick of the 2nd round. And, even I will go outside my comfort zone and take, this guy, because otherwise I'm taking the center that I really like, who doesn't run block, and, some other dumb idea that I get into my head because his ratings are going to get big and pretty, but, So.
Right. Next one, right? This one, I'm going to be a bit of a fanboy now, right? This is just, I kind of, one of the things I love doing when you play multiplayer, and we've not been in the same league for a while. I used to be in IHOF. I love the magic tricks, right? I love it when you come up with this stuff and you're just like, how the frickin' hell has he done that? Most people value interceptions bars on players in their secondary, right? Look at this guy on the left, right?
Yeah.
Fine. Looks
but
great.
he can cover a dunk,
he
right?
can't
That's what
do
I see.
it.
Like,
Yeah, right, but he's not going to.
Dunk,
I want interceptions, right? I want interceptions. I think that's an important thing to get. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't. Oh, look what MalcPow's done again, right?
I love this guy.
Come on,
this
man!
guy,
Like, what are you seeing, right? Tell us now what you are seeing, because I've got no idea at all.
Well, I think, there's a couple things with this guy. I got really excited about this guy too, because he was a purple grouper, and I was, really excited about chasing my chemistry effects after watching, earlier episodes of the Squirrel and Quik show. No, but I guess like there's part of me that just wants to be like, all right, again, it's a 16 bench. It's not a 13 bench. It's a 6.76 agility. Like that's an elite, like absolute elite score. Like the soul test is really high. Like his position score is like, it's not incredible, but like it's high. And he was super developed. I don't know his age. I don't have this class like up in front of me, but he was really developed. He was in the right group. The 23rd pick in the 2nd round, like, again, this guy was like whether you call him a 4 to 9 or a 5 to 9 like I do or not, like, he was like right there on my list as like, this guy's really good. This guy's a 65. This guy's a 60 plus. And he was checking all these other boxes. And like, again, like there's just other things too. Like I like guys, I like guys with return skills. Like I think that's like interesting. Like obviously that broad jump number is pretty big. And I like guys with a single return skill actually, too, is sort of a concentration effect maybe. I have no idea, but it's something that's interesting to me. I really like this guy. This was I'm glad you picked him, because I had a very good draft in this class, other than I think I got teased again with the he convinced me that endurance didn't matter on offensive linemen, and then immediately after I took a 0 endurance offensive lineman, I had like 3 people be like, what have you figured out about how to like play a 0 endurance offensive lineman? And I was like, I haven't figured anything out. Did I like completely screw this up again? And
I agree with him, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't think endurance matters on offensive linemen at all. Do you, Quik?
I got nothing.
I
draft them.
I don't know. All right, so that's.
I'll put my head in the sand and play the guy. We'll see what happens. So, yeah.
All right, one more. I think I got one more on this. Let's see if I can bring up this one. So this one, all right, fairly interesting looking. I think even I would have figured out that this guy was a DN conversion, but this guy looks like an utterly dominant
pass rusher. Yeah.
The lineman pass rusher. I
pull
think
up his stats for this year, because he's off to. He is on like an insane pace right now.
Right, so
12 sacks through 5 games.
So he's the leading rusher. 12 sacks through 5. He's the leading rusher in IHOF, and he's going to be that for as long as he's playing. Now, how much of that? This one feels less like a magic trick, right? This one's a full static, and the important parts there, and there's decent endurance, and there's decent combines. I guess this one's more the league didn't value this prospect highly enough. You agree with that one? Oh, sorry. One thing, just as a point of detail. You see that zone defense there, 2 to 32? I think sometimes you see bars and they don't go to 0, they go to 1 or they go to 2. And I always think that's a bit weird. And I always think that's something that's a sort of, I don't know if that tells you something, but I get a sense of encouragement when I see that. So if I was faced with this prospect, I'd have said, pick him in the range 15, 20, 25th pick of the first round. Was this just a good class or something? Do people just miss this guy?
A hugely good class.
Yeah, okay. So is there less magic on this guy? This is just a high static and a really good bar and good combines, and it's just a simpler one?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm constantly, again, working through, parts of the earlier conversation. Like, you need, whether they're actual defensive linemen or guys you play on your defensive line, you need that pass rush technique and pass rush strength with endurance. If they can hold their own in the run game, that's helpful, important. So that's just, when I go through, kind of my bar estimators, I'll just straight sort by pass rush technique, and like whatever position a guy's playing. Like, obviously Riley was an inside linebacker at the time. He weighed 257, I guess. I think we weight trained him up to 267, it looks like. But yep. And now he's been kind of dominant on the D line for us. But a lot of times I'll take a guy like this and convert him to outside linebacker, give him that kind of versatility where he can go play in some DN slots, but still, kind of has like, his coverage bars and his other things. And you can kind of do whatever. I don't know why I do that. I think there's like a part of me, Jim's documentation has all sorts of stuff about how the combine scores matter, even though the bars like are there. Like, of course, there's wording that has always struck me, that seems to imply that in addition to the bars, there's, the combines obviously fluctuate from year to year, but there's like a combine modifier that gets fed into the soup or the milkshake or whatever the hell is going on with this game. And so I tend to think linebackers, they have better dash scores. And since I'm chasing pass rush technique and sacks usually with these guys, I usually leave them as outside linebackers. But Riley got big enough, and I can't remember why I put him all the way to DE, but yeah, he's been a monster. This is learning experience for me too. But yeah, definitely less of a magic trick and more of a, hey, like, go find those big bars and see if a guy weighs enough or looks like he might be a conversion candidate, because you can get a lot more out of some of these guys just by moving them to different spots.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, that I think is kind of what we got on prospects. The one thing I actually put on the screen is, I know you're writing a thread at FOFC, and let me see if I can make that readable. So, and Quik writes one on GML2. GML is such a good sandbox, could go so fast. So as you're making picks, you're doing some commentary on them. So that's something that people can follow. I mean, look, step away from the specific picks and the maybe quite data-driven conversation that preceded it. For someone watching this who's either new to front office football, has just found this video on YouTube, or is someone that plays in the multiplayer community and is like, what? MalcPow did a video and clicked on it, right? For these people, if they're not hyper into data-driven approaches to this game, if they're not into, they don't care what multivariate linear regression is, they don't really want to figure out, they've Googled how to calculate a similarity score, and they're like, whoa, no, I'm not doing any of that shit. I'm not going to learn Python. I'm not going to learn SQL. I don't care about how Excel macros work. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. I just want to know how to pick better players, right? What's the 80-20 version of all of this? How do we, if you're going to distill it down to somebody who's just trying to get a bit better at drafting, and they're not going to do all of this, what should those people be doing?
Personally, I think like the right answer there is, if you're in one of these, if you're playing single player, there's going to be talent that drifts into the third and fourth round. That again, if you're using Draft Analyzer or even just clicking through the game by hand, there are going to be some guys who jump out who just have, like, they've got big bars, they look like good players. There aren't huge red flags, in their combines. I think like it's helpful to wherever you go, there's more precise sort of like threads and information now. I think Draft Analyzer is a great resource, but be able to eyeball the combines and and see that, there isn't an outlier, positive or negative. It's just helpful to have that reference point. There's going to be players that have like big bars. They might not be at the position that you need them. I'm taking a longer way to get there, but if you play in one of these competitive multiplayer leagues, really like by the end of the second round, we're all kind of, chasing quirky guys or less sexy positions, or doing things that, like, you're not getting like the 82 wide receiver at pick 318. Like that's just, it's kind of, you shouldn't expect it. You shouldn't take a wide receiver at that pick, because you can almost like be certain that like he's not what you're hoping he is. So I would, like, what would I recommend? Trading up in that, like, first 50 picks. I mean, I really think, like, if you go back, you don't have to do the research. You can kind of take my word for it, but there's going to be, call it 60 guys who are, 55 or better in each draft class as like a rough estimate. When you get into the 4th and 5th and 6th round and some of those picks, like, don't have high expectations for those picks, I guess and don't troll through, all the indistinguishable parts that seem to be staring you in the face at 6.8, and then agonize over, getting a poor player or something. It's like, there really aren't like great players there. So I would focus a lot on those first couple picks. I would even try and trade into, where possible, the top 50, maybe 60, but really like the top half of the second round. After the top half of the second round, the midway point of the second round of most drafts, even I'm looking at like kind of what's out there, and it's you're kind of taking, what the board gives you. You don't really have, like, you can't, I mean, we can talk about magic tricks and stuff, but it's like, if I really need like a good safety at 2.18, most of the time it's, you're just not there or something. Yeah. Or like that positional sort of, like, you can't really dictate like what you're going to get at that point. And definitely if you want like a quarterback or a receiver, or just, I would I think, like, set your expectations a little bit more realistically in some of these multiplayer environments. And I think a lot of people have, right? Like, I think like most people are like, okay, like, you're either going to, take that quarterback with the top 2 or 3 pick, or you're going to trade 3 firsts for them, or you're going to get some, 12th year journeyman and try and, squeeze a few years out of them before it's all over, because he slipped into free agency at that point. But yeah, I mean, we talked about it. I do start with like the raw grade. I look at the bars. I think, like, as a starting point for anybody, like, don't make certain aspects of the game like more complicated than it is. Like, if this guy's like the highest rated linebacker in the class and he's got good combines and like big bars, and you think he fits for your team, like, it's going to be a good pick. Like, I promise. Like, don't kind of like, don't tie yourself in knots, And like, if you've got the 5th pick and, no wide receivers have gone off the board, and there's 3 guys that have good combines and massive bars, and, their raw grades are up at the top of the board, like, they're going to be a good pick. Like, one might be better than the other. I can't really tell. Like, again, like, focus on some key bars, like we talked about earlier. Like, don't do what I did and take the 22 route running wide receiver. Like, make sure you're taking, the guy who looks like he's got like a 70 plus route running bar or something. But like, just, stick to kind of the basics and make sure that key bar looks like it's fine. Make sure there's not some huge outlier one way or another. And frankly, like, don't get too cute with it. Like, even I think it's probably a useful exercise to have walked through like some of those picks that I made, because even where we're like, hey, this guy's masked, look at these, look at where this route running bar is, or look at where this is, like, other than the quarterback, which could turn out to be a disaster, I'm not taking guys with like 0s in like 4 spots and then like 60s in 3 spots.
Yep.
It's like,
yep.
they're like 90s in 3 spots and like 50s in like some other spots. And like, that's kind of the pool you want to be swimming in, where you're like, okay, like, if this guy's masked, he's really good. If he's not masked, like, I can do something with him. But I think like the biggest thing is probably like hey, let the draft board, the in-game draft board even like tell you something. Let the rank by kind of bar score that you get in the draft analyzer or something like that tell you something. Don't have such high expectations that you're gonna pull an elite player in the fifth round or something. I think if you want to get those guys, trade up to the first round. Trade if you think one's still sitting there, trade into the early second round. Like that's just. I mean, obviously, Quik I think has started doing it in almost all his leagues, where he's just like, I'm gonna get two good players, and you guys can do whatever the hell you want for day 3, day 4 of like watching somebody sit on the clock in the fifth round or something. Like, who cares? And I think it's really like it's the most logical and intelligent way to like approach like this part of the game. Like, know that there's 50, 60 good players. Go try and get 2 of them, and you're ahead of the curve. So.
And so let's move on from, because we're talking about draft strategy now, right? So we're away from prospect evaluation, talking about draft strategy. So when we think about trading picks, I think we just talked about some of the reasons you might trade picks. I guess if you've got poor scouting, you might trade picks. If you frankly, if you just think you've got poor process, right? So someone who's got a Python script, the pick is more valuable to that person than it is to someone who is just looking at the game. So maybe it makes sense to trade picks in that context. Maybe if you're looking at the board and you just think, hang on a minute, second rounder normally gets me better value than this, maybe trade it. That's a big thing in Red Zone Blitz, which is a league with a lot of trading and a lot of, the great thing about that league is if you need value for your pick, you can go and ask people, and there'll be a few people who will give you a bid for practically any asset in the game quite quickly. So it's quite cool in that respect. So if you just want to sort of trade around and move around, it's a quite sort of liquid market, if you like. And if you don't like the value on the board for the pick, you can try and move it into a future year or whatever. Can I just ask, do you guys associate particular position groups with particular parts of the draft? We've talked about wide receivers at the top of the draft quite a lot in this discussion. Do you think, okay, I want XYZ profile of player for my roster, I'm going to need an X pick for this? Is that how you think about it?
That sounds a little too rigid.
I think, like, for me, if I've got a top 10 pick, and just straight laugh at me, because again, I took a guard with the 4th pick in that IHawk draft that we were just talking about. But he was so sexy, guys. I'm just telling you. But I do think if you're in that top 10 pick world, all of a sudden, hopefully you're not getting opportunities like that all that often. And it does create kind of some pressure to either, hey, I got to get a quarterback or a wide receiver or like an elite player that's going to touch the ball, basically, is kind of one of the things I think about. And, there have been times where I really valued like that left tackle position as like a concept. Not necessarily because I had like some data driven research for it, but it just felt like, if I had a really good one, I saw my teams performing in a kind of a cleaner game. But really, I would say, offense just matters so much in this game, and you get into that top 10 world. It's just kind of like you're either hoping you get one of those guys, or obviously your proximity to that guy with the 1st pick or the 2nd pick or the 3rd pick is just so much higher. And I think there becomes like some pressure to sort of be like, all right, I'm gonna put a couple firsts together to move up and take the best wide receiver in this class or the best quarterback in this class, because really, I would say like something like a little bit more beefed up than anecdotally, there's probably 2 starter caliber quarterbacks in the average class, and usually one of them is that 1-1 obvious, complete no-brainer, like, kind of guy that doesn't take any sort of, real art to sort of suss out. And so unless you have that pick, or you do what it takes to get that pick, you're not getting that guy.
Yep.
And then, then it kind of becomes, do you get the right fit? Kind of, is he going to be a triple affinity for the quick man, or something like that? Is he, he's got to big medium bar for somebody else. I'm not really sure. But there just aren't that many quarterbacks, and you need one. And although Zach seems to find some ways to squeeze a lot out of let's be honest, like a 50 rated quarterback, you can go grab one every offseason. So I think, really that's where, for me, that wide receiver position is the toughest one to find. And if you're in the top 10, you kind of really, you should zero in on one, even if you have 3 of them or something, you should probably zero in on one. So
yeah, I think this is a difference, a big divergence between the NFL and front office football for me, which is in the NFL, there is this idea that if you're trading down on the draft board, you're probably doing the right thing. And there is maybe a slight difference of view now because of the whole quarterback deal thing where they're cheap at the start and all, but leaving that aside for a minute, this vague idea that you're basically trading down is a good thing. Now in this game that we play, when you've got a weak team that's got a high pick and you see them trade it to somebody for 3 or first round picks that are going to be the playoff part of the draft, for me that's always the wrong thing to do. If there's a quarterback or a receiver on the board, just take them. Don't think too much. Just do that. But the other thing, you mentioned rigid Quik. Let me. What do you think of this? I don't think you should ever take a defensive player of any type or at all in the first round of the draft. What do you think?
I don't have that kind of discipline. So I just find these sexy pass rushers and shut down corners, and I'm excited by Darrelle Revis's and so forth. So I can't help myself.
I think it's probably the most intelligent, expected value added, way to play the game. It's a kind of, to Quick's point, I'll draft that linebacker, man. I'll do it. I'll do it again. I'll do it next week. I'll do it yesterday. It's just, I don't know why. I can't help myself. Big red bars, baby. Let's go.
As long as you guys leave the intelligent O lineman to me, and particularly the ones with low endurance, which I'll take in the first round too. Is there any premium role on defense? Is there any role on defense that's more valuable than the other roles? Do we think? I don't think there is. I think the D tackle spot is the least valuable, and then it's probably the field. But it's not as if I know. But the way I play the game is, I need some pass rush technique on my defensive ends. You can buy that in free agency, or you can get it at the bottom of the draft, because there are one-trick pony guys available. You can rotate them. The cornerbacks, I remain to be convinced they make that much difference, and it's all much for muchness for me. It doesn't mean I'm right. Don't win every time I play the game. But do you think there are any premium defensive roles that you think are more valuable than the others, or as valuable as a first-round pick?
I'll offer one little thing, and this isn't really drafting. It's more global FOF strategy. I think too many FOF teams are built around run-stopping linebackers. They're easy to find, these guys who can make 110 tackles, and they have a run bar of 94 or whatever, and then their zone bar is 26. There's a ton of teams out there who make a mint running their tight end over the middle into the zone that's being covered by linebacker and crushing bad coverage linebackers. So when we get our linebackers, it's easy to look for tackles, but guys who can cover have an awful lot of value. And if you can get an all-day linebacker who can do all those things, I think there are subtle benefits to that are probably more valuable to your team than the 11 sacks from your starting left end.
Yeah, I think the contributions on defense, definitely with defensive backs, it's almost to the point where I think the stats in the game they're broken, because there's just almost no correlation between what seemingly are really talented players at some of those spots, like cornerback in particular, and then what am I getting from that? It's difficult, certainly difficult for me to kind of parse through the information that the game is spitting out and say this shutdown cornerback is shutting anything down. I like defensive ends, or at least pass rushers. I do think, especially if you run a 4-3, that middle linebacker spot, kind of for the reasons that Quick's talking about, you can tell that guy matters, because because he ends up with 60 passes caught against him, and you're just kind of like, anyone that's involved in that many plays, anyone whose like ratings are kind of coming into play, and that's that many plays, that sort of volume of activity, you just have to think that like what they're doing matters. And I do think if you have like an elite middle linebacker and your 4-3, that it tends to, again, the defensive side of the ball, it's really hard to like isolate contributions, but I think it's important. Is it more important than a wide receiver? No. Does it maybe line up with an intelligent, low endurance offensive lineman? Like, I think it probably does. If you can get it, again, I think like there's also a part, and Quik and I have had some version of this interaction, which is just like, hey, sometimes just go take that really elite player, because he's probably helping everybody. There's a lot of like, I don't know, but that strong sort of, intuition that there are a lot of global ratings that are kind of clashing in this game, whether it's sort of an overall run defense rating, or your defensive lines pass rush technique kind of aggregated. There are a lot of like globals that I think are kind of like coming into play here. And I think if you can, dropping in some dude who's just like 92 across the board, probably helps in every single one of those dimensions, and covers for a lot of deficiencies from a number of other places. So
that's very interesting, because I've got to say that runs counter to the way I play the game. Doesn't mean I think you're wrong, but the way that I've ended up, the direction of travel for me has been this kind of essentialist mentality of, I care about this bar and this bar and nothing else for this position. I care about this and this and nothing else, and I'll get it as cheaply as possible. And my rosters normally, the overall ratings look awful, right? And that doesn't mean my rosters are good. I'm just saying that I'm always petrified of spending on the 80 rated defensive tackle who can't rush the quarterback because of the second contract price. And I just think, well, that could bugger my cap up. And, if any of these players I'm drafting are good, then I'll have cap pressure. It's pretty hard to have cap pressure, right, in most multiplayer leagues, though it is possible. If you you must have loads of cap pressure with all the players you're drafting, but with sort of more moderate drafting skill, it's quite difficult to get cap pressure. But it's interesting. Maybe I should go and adopt that different approach. Just one more thing before we wrap up. I'm mindful that we've covered a lot, but most conversations about drafting, right, start here. We're ending up here. Do you guys, the need versus best player available debate, do you guys ever draft for need ever?
Yeah, I'll fall victim to that here and there. I'm game to do that. I have a more manual process of looking at a draft, and I will spend more time on a position that I've decided, ideally I'd like to use the pick 28 overall in this draft to get a cornerback number 1, because I just had a retirement and that's my biggest obvious need. So I'll do that.
I mean, you got a the way I imagine you're doing it, just the way I watch you play it, is you've got kind of 2 or 3 years ahead in mind, so the needs are less pronounced, if you see what I mean.
Yeah,
you've
definitely.
got a sense of 3 or 4 needs, and you'll pick one of them. Is that kind of how you're thinking about it?
For me, definitely.
Yeah, I think from a practical standpoint, you end up having to almost. I mean, it sounds like you talked about the RZB is like a league where there's so much liquidity, and you can get a price on any asset in the game in relatively short order. I think in most of these other leagues, like if you're sort of set at a position, but that that wide receiver or whatever, that tight end that's staring you in the face at the back of the first round is the best overall in a vacuum, like, talent on the board. If you really feel like you kind of can't get value, at least without a lot of agony and private message warfare and just sort of the attrition of dealing with the rest of us idiots, for some long period of time, like if you can't get value, for what you have, like just a lot of times I'll take the guy who I think is probably going to play for me more quickly. and sort of like play a role for the team. Like there was like another quarterback that I liked in that GML draft where I took the center, but it's like, what am I going to do? I'm going to take 2 quarterbacks with like my first 2 picks, like joining the league, and like just kind of like hang out with one, and like
in a league where there are no injuries.
Yeah, exactly. In a league with no injuries, but but I'm gonna put them on the block like 10 minutes from now and be like, hey guys, I'm really smart. Trust me, this guy's good. Give me your next 3 firsts, and we'll call it a day. I mean,
I probably would have done that, by the way. I'd have taken both. I'd have taken both, and then figured out which one's got the better avoid interceptions and the one that will reveals, and then I'd have traded the other one.
It takes a lot to make me feel dirty, but even I would have probably felt a little something there. So,
well, one more. One more question on draft strategy before I finish up, and we wrap this up. What does best player available mean?
I mean, I think it means kind of like from the perspective I think you're describing, which I think is really sound play, which is like, hey, like I need a running back who does this. I need receivers to do this. I need a quarterback who's not going to take sacks and, is going to do, whatever. I think like the best player available is some guy who kind of like hits those checkpoints for you. Like it's quarterback, wide receiver kind of at the top of the list. If you already have a stud quarterback, like, kind of, I guess maybe throw that out the window, but, general universe of the game, like these are the most productive positions. And again, for me, an elite player at other positions, has non-verified impact in a way that makes them interesting. But I think best player available is some version of quarterback, wide receiver. If you're going to run the ball, running back in the back half of the first round, stud offensive lineman, stud tight end, stud DE, stud CB. Again, laugh in my face because that chase linebackers all over the damn board, but they don't matter that much. I think it's probably pretty clear, unless you're playing them as defensive ends, which I think is a good way to use them. But like some kind of fudge the numbers, rank or weight those positions really heavily, especially if they have, those kind of key attributes that seem to, in this iteration of the game engine, really drive outcomes. Stir it up, take a bite. There it is. That's the best player available.
I don't know. I just try to think to myself, if this guy came to free agency, how heavy would the overbidding be? Right.
Yeah.
If this guy came to free agency and I'm the only guy bidding, then that's one thing. If this guy comes to free agency and 15 people are bidding, and the overbid is heavy and the price is X and whatever. And I guess it's just sort of how hard is this to replace? When I'm trying to replace my cornerback with sort of moderate bars and the right affinity group, I can do that easily. When I'm trying to replace my second wide receiver, which I always think is one of the most important players in the game, that's super difficult. And I'm supposed to, people want me to trade 3 first rounds for it. So, that guy that you found in whatever it was, the 5th pick of the second round, which is a really amazing wide receiver, and you'd already picked one in the same draft. For me, just off that information and nothing else, if you wait 3 or 4 years, if you were not already, and I'm sure you were, that's a perennial playoff team just because you've done that, right?
I think pretty that's much, in this version of the game, you put 2 60-plus receivers on a team, and then again, like obviously if you do completely idiotic things, or I had a dynasty at the beginning of coronavirus shutdown that where I was running kind of gimp quarterbacks out with like monster rosters around them, and won 8 bowls or something stupid. And,
right.
But like if you have receiver talent, and you just even make moderately intelligent decisions around them, like you're going to be successful. It is what it is. So it's a fact.
So there we go. So that was 90 minutes on drafting with a master, and the result is pick receivers.
or trade up so you can pick receivers. I don't know. I mean, it's I hate to say it, but that's
Wow.
yeah. It's in. Damn.
I think we found the Rosetta Stone here.
There we go. I got nothing more to cover. Quick, you got anything else you want to cover while we got the main man on the line?
This is really good.
We should call it that. We can't call it the Squirrel and Quick Show. We've got to call it the Quick and Squirrel Show. It's too high ego for me.
Not feeling too good about it. Not even.
Quick definitely feels like the sidekick for what it's worth. I'm just kind of just.
That's harsh. That's harsh. You could you clearly didn't hear the bit where we were waxing lyrical about the affinity long snapper. That was pretty major stuff.
Oh god.
That was the most emotional we've got so far in his video.
Right. Well, okay, it's a bar we can try and clear.
All right, now
you guys are great. You guys are great.
This remains the only thing that remains to be done is for me to figure out how to turn Zoom off and stop this thing recording. All right, I'm going to try and stop this thing recording now. And goodbye, everyone else.